Hello, this is Lauren speaking, and welcome to this video. In this video, I'm going to be looking at the U.S. birth chart and seeing what is the astrological activity coming up between now and the start of 2027. And, well, let's get into it. Let's start with the birth data for the U.S. We're looking at the chart July 4th, 1776 at 5:10 p.m. in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. And of course, you can check out astro.com for that chart and for the source notes. It's clear over the past couple centuries, the astrologers have come up more or less with their conclusions between about 4:50 p.m. and 5:15 p.m. And so we're using that 5:10 chart, and we can see just by testing the past when transiting Pluto was precisely conjunct the ascendant of this birth chart for the U.S. is September 2001, when the 9/11 World Trade Center event went on, the destruction of the World Trade Center. So we know that the chart, at least for that event, and of course for other events, is accurate. So let's take a look at what's going on. Now, we have to keep in mind that when outer planet transits are conjunct, square, or opposed the angles of a birth chart, major life events take place, such as 9/11 as an example. So what does the U.S. have coming up? I'm going to keep the astrology real simple. The U.S. will have transiting Neptune opposed the midheaven. The first hit of that will be in April of 2025, running until March of 2026. And then the following month, in April of 2026, until February of 2027, Neptune will square natal Venus. So let's look and see what the possibilities are for Neptune coming up to oppose the midheaven. Now understand as well that Neptune is in the final degrees of Pisces. It's getting ready to make its ingress into the sign of Aries at 0 degrees of Aries. And that will take place in the end of March, the last day of March of 2025. So if we go back to exactly when Neptune was in this same position in U.S. history, it was the American Civil War that began on April 12th, 1861. And where was transiting Neptune then? Well, just 2 days before Neptune's ingress into 0 degrees of Aries, that's when the Civil War began. So Neptune was at 29 Pisces 56. Exactly where it will be this year at the end of June into the first week of July 2024, and also March 28th, 2025, just 3 days before it ingresses into the sign of Aries. So, hypothetically, there could be the potential here for a war situation, whatever the circumstances might be. Now, I'm just going back here and checking my recorder. Yes, everything is recording well. And at any rate, so we've got that. Now, the best thing we can do here is to test when transiting Neptune was square to the midheaven and opposed Venus, and when it was conjunct the midheaven and square to Venus. Because that gives us a good idea of what are the potentials that are coming up here between April of 2025 until February of 2027. So let's start here by going back to when transiting Neptune was conjunct the midheaven. And that takes us back to the end of 1942 into about September of 43. And then transiting Neptune would square Venus from the end of 43 until September 44. So we've got the end of 42 until about September 1944. Well, the U.S. involvement in the World War II, was between 1941 and 1945. So right there in the middle of their involvement in a world war, we have this transit. And just a few events. I'm not going to go through the whole World War II here, but just looking over some events that I looked up when transiting Neptune was conjunct the midheaven and square to Venus. The U.S. and the U.K. forces land in French North Africa at the end of November, exactly November 42, on the first hit. Then you had, between the end of 42 until February 43, the battle between Japanese troops and the U.S. At that time, in November of 42, again, keep in mind the first hit of transiting Neptune to the midheaven, coffee rationing begins, and in December of 42, gasoline rationing begins. And in the start of 43, the U.S. and the U.K. give up territorial rights in China. In January 43 as well, the Pentagon, the building, the largest office building, was dedicated. And anyways, as we go through this, we get to mid-43, the Battle of Normandy, known as D-Day, when this operation helped liberate France from Germany. Also, there was the surrender of Italy to the Allies. And then at the end, in December of 43, the Great Depression officially ends in the U.S. So that's the events that were going on the last time that transiting Neptune was conjunct the midheaven and square to Venus. Some other interesting little events in there, because I think that this could also apply to the current situation, is that at the start of 43, there was the Manhattan Project, which was a secret laboratory for the development and production of the first atomic bombs. They began their operations then. And at the end of 43, 15 atomic scientists arrived from the UK to join the US Atomic Research Project. Also, in October 43, the Philadelphia experiment, very interesting, very Neptunian, where the U.S. destroyer ship was rendered invisible to human observers for a brief period. You know, Neptune is always other than it really is, other than it really seems. And another thing I thought was quite interesting in August of 43 was the U.S. Forest Service and the Wartime Advertising Council released posters of Smokey Bear, for the first time. And there was also a big fire at the end of 42 in Boston, in Coconut Grove nightclub that killed 500 people, whatever. So we've got here things to do with fires, experimentation, and development of, atomic bombs. And of course, we have a major war, World War II. So now let's go on and look at what are the similarities when transiting Neptune was square the midheaven and opposed Venus. Okay, so shifting over here to my notes. Transiting Neptune was square the midheaven between February 84 until the end of 85, and in 1985, transiting Neptune was opposed Venus. Now, some similarities here, and also what comes to mind in this 84-85 period is the novel 1984 by George Orwell, although that had nothing to do with when he wrote it and when it was published, but I find it very interesting that it was 1984, the title of the novel. Okay, 1984. Well, at the start of the year, the U.S. Marines pull out of Beirut, Lebanon, and a couple months later, in April 84, very interesting, the U.S. Public Health Service announces the identity of the virus that causes AIDS. So we've definitely, Neptune rules over hard to diagnose diseases, viruses, this kind of thing. So very Neptunian. And in 1985, very important, was the Iran-Contra affair. August 85, the first arms are sent to Iran in exchange for hostages in Lebanon and profits for the Nicaraguan Contras without public knowledge. Very important there, without public knowledge. Other events, there were flash floods. In 84, there was quite a few airline disasters going on during those 2 years. What else do we have here? There was a ship that was hijacked in the Mediterranean Sea by 4 Palestinian terrorists in October 85. We also had the Unabomber going on then in that period in 1985. Those were mail bombs that were sent to people. So we can see that we're dealing with things to do with potential war. What else? Weather conditions, flooding and fires, things that were probably are not known to the public, such as, for example, and this is what becomes sort of interesting here, is that Venus rules the 6th house and the 10th and the 11th. And, of course, the 6th house has to do with military, police, civil services, employment and unemployment, wage conditions, labor unions, public health, medical services, food and drink. And of course, the 10th house has to do with the governments in power, such as the president, and the 11th house, friends and allies of a nation. And so branches of government, also the stock exchange. So I think that there is the potential here that when transiting Neptune will be opposed the midheaven, well, there will definitely be major events for the United States. Something else that's quite interesting going on, because the 4th house does have to do with the interests of the people. It has to do with the housing, real estate, the housing market. It has to do with agriculture, crops, produce, those types of things, as well as weather conditions, severe weather conditions. But I was just thinking about this mass immigration going on in the United States, which I think is a public topic. I don't watch mainstream media, but I get my news from alternative sources on the internet. And there was a recent, at the end of February, Tucker Carlson, who used to work for Fox News, did a report on mass immigration of military-age males entering the United States. The title of that report was "Mass Immigration is Completely Destroying Our Country. Why is no one doing anything about it?" So there could be things that are going on that are with Neptune that are not known to the public, just like the Iran-Contra affair. And, well, why would so many people be flooding in male-aged, military-aged men into the U.S.? Could be the prelude to something that could potentially be some kind of a civil war or a war situation. I mean, this is just putting together the past. The last time transiting Neptune was hitting off the angle of the U.S. chart, and with current events in the world. There's also going to be probably a very important events going on right around March, April of 2025, when Neptune ingresses into Aries and makes its first opposition to the midheaven. This does coincide with Israel in terms of the astrology going on with Israel, because transiting Uranus is conjunct the sun of Israel. The last hit will be in March 2025. Just taking an eyeball look at Palestine, yes. And in Palestine's birth chart, transiting Uranus will conjunct the midheaven for the last hit in March 2025. So we can assume right around March-April, of 2025, probably an important event going on. And on the last hit of transiting Neptune opposed the midheaven in March of 2026, also coincides with Israel, the last hit of transiting Uranus square Mars in their horoscope, which I did make predictions in my previous videos. You can watch on Israel, the war predictions with their birth chart, and also with Palestine's birth chart. So we've got March of 2026, very important. The spring of 2025, the spring of 2026, and then when transiting Neptune is going to finalize the square to Venus in February of 2027, and I cannot emphasize that month enough. I mean, if I had to mark a calendar, February 2027, because in both Israel and Palestine's chart, this is a major, major, major time, okay? And who knows what the conclusion of that could be. It could be, for example, maybe this is when there's going to be a peace treaty, because I'm just thinking about when Egypt and Israel signed a peace treaty between Sadat and Begin in the U.S. with President Carter at Camp David. It could potentially be talking about the resolution of a Palestinian state and the conclusion of everything that's been going on. So we are absolutely in major changing times for the United States as well, and for the entire world. So I don't think we need more astrology than that. If we keep it simple, stupid, the KISS theory, K-I-S-S, I love that theory, we just need to look at the big bells. And the big bells here is transiting Neptune opposed the midheaven. This is absolutely going to change the U.S. Between now and February of 2027. There's other astrology going on here, but I believe it's all echoing the same things. And, well, we'll see what happens. Of course, there's going to be a presidential election going on at the end of 2024. That will be another topic for that time. But keep in mind that as transiting Neptune is at this final position in Pisces, and it was the start of the Civil War, the last time it was in that same position, that is going to be taking place at the 29th degree. It's going to be taking place this summer, like I said, at the end of June to the first week of July 2024. So there could be things going on that affect the U.S. election, because that's when the Democratic National Convention will be in August, and then the Republican Convention, and, well, who knows what could happen, right? So it will just be what it is, because, astrology, we always understand it in retrospect, and we can only make so many assumptions beforehand. So that's what I have to show you. Major changing times for the entire world, and of course for the potential of a war, whether it would be civil war, whether it would be a type of world war, who knows, okay? Who knows? At any rate, I will do updates as we move into the future on the U.S. chart, and certainly on the election coming up at the end of the year. And I appreciate you subscribing to my channel, giving my video a thumbs up if you appreciate it, and sharing, and blessings go out to everyone. God bless, and talk to you on the next video. Thank you for listening. Bye-bye now.